Legend of Total War here, and today we're doing another tier list using Tier Maker. This time I'm going to be ranking all 100 legendary lords in the game based on how good they are on the battlefield. Now before we get into the tier list itself, I do need to let you guys know that this video here is sponsored by Manscaped. You guys know I've been with Manscaped for ages. I love the product, love working with them. Today I'm talking about the Handyman. It gives the closest shave I've ever received from an electric razor. It's a must-have if you want to avoid giving your partner pash rash. And because it's so easy to use, you can get the job done quickly, which gives you more time for other things. Spend less time in the bathroom and more time in the bedroom thanks to Manscaped. Check out the link in the description or the pinned comment and get 20% off plus free international shipping. Big thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Okay, with that being said, let's get into the tier list itself. So I think with this one, we need to have a very strict criteria because you could make the argument that any one of these legendary lords could be a one-man doomstack. And so things like the Sword of Cain and Nemesis Crown and the Helm of Draesker trait, the Doomsinger trait, all of these high-effort things that you can do to make your characters super strong, but are either requiring a huge amount of luck or a huge amount of time or a huge amount of effort in order for them to achieve, we're not going to take those into consideration, especially considering if everyone is able to do it, then we should judge everyone by the exact same criteria. So let's just assume that none of them get any of that for this particular tier list sake. What we will take into consideration is like their skill tree, the unique items that they can obtain, but also the generic items that they can obtain from their faction. So things like Talisman of Preservation, we'll just assume that everyone gets that because I think that's available to every single faction except for the Demon Prince. And then we'll also take into consideration, for example, for the Warriors of Chaos, that they can have access to the Crown of Everlasting Conquest, which is a green item that provides regeneration without fire weakness that only the Warriors of Chaos can obtain. There are other regenerating items, and we'll take that into consideration when valid. Now, the criteria that we'll use, there's 3 categories, and in order to enter one-man doomstack status, they have to achieve high marks in all 3 of those status. Even if they're like the greatest in one of those categories, they have to achieve all 3 in order to be the one-man doomstack, because that just means they can handle any situation. So if they can only handle, so if they've only got 2 out of the 3 like top marks, then they'll either enter A or B tier. If they've only got 1 of the 3, then it'll either be B or C tier. And if they're like fairly low marks on across all 3, then they'll enter D tier. I do think that this is going to be a fairly top-heavy tier list with most of the characters being in A and B tier, and there'll be very few characters that enter D tier, because there are very few legendary lords that are actually kind of lame on the battlefield. Very, very few of them. Now, the 3 categories are how durable they are. So there's lots of things that we can take into consideration for durability. Speed can be taken into consideration for durability. So if you're really quick, they can't get you, so you can move out of the way. The size should also be taken into consideration for durability. So the bigger you are, the worse it is for your durability. Natural resistances, so if you've got naturally high ward save or naturally high physical resistance, that'll be taken into consideration. And naturally high melee defense, or things that basically allow you to endure for a really long amount of time, will be ranked highly for in basically the durability section. Then the other one is basically how good are they at mass killing. So spellcasters will almost always enter top marks for this, but there are some laws of magic that are significantly better than others. So for example, Law of Nehekara is probably on its own not going to meet the criteria to get one-man doomstack status, because that is a pretty trashy law of magic in terms of inflicting mass casualties. But that criteria, just for how many casualties can they inflict using like abilities, or how quickly can they kill enemy infantry. And then the third one is how good are they at dueling? Can they basically go into any fight against any single entity or any legendary lord and just come out on top, or at least hold their own for a good amount of time, or will they die in 5 seconds? So one-man doomstacks will be good in all 3 of those categories. Let's start now with Draika. We'll do this race by race. So we're going to start with Wood Elves. Actually, let's zoom out a little bit because there are a lot of legendary lords here. It's going to fill up pretty quick. Okay, so let's start with Draika. So Draika is reasonably good in melee, but I wouldn't say that it's enough to enter one-man doomstack status. She's a spellcaster. She's a good spellcaster, so she's able to inflict mass amounts of casualties. Getting 100 or a couple of 100 casualties with her is not that difficult at all. And she's pretty durable because she's quite small, and it's easy for her to hide. So I'm going to put her under A tier there. So a lot of value, but that is just about inflicting casualties with her spells for the and her abilities for the most part. But yeah, she's not necessarily a duelist. Not terrible at dueling, but not good enough to actually take on a duelist for a reasonable amount of time. Then we've got Durthu over here. So with Durthu is really good in melee. And he is a good spellcaster because he's got Lore of Beasts, and he's also got the Sword of Death ability. So he's able to inflict hundreds of casualties, maybe slightly fewer than Dryka, because his Lore of Magic is not quite as deadly to infantry. But I think the part where he doesn't reach one-man Doomstack status is because of his durability. Because he is a very big target and he's very slow. He's extremely vulnerable to getting shot, as I've recently experienced in a Saving and Disaster battle. So I'd put him under A tier because he's good in melee, good spellcaster, just his durability is lacking, that's all. Then we've got the Sisters of Twilight. So they are very good in melee. They're able to get a good number of kills because she's not a spellcaster, but she is an archer, and she's able to inflict quite a lot of casualties. Probably not quite as much as these two here, but her durability is extremely high. So I think with the Sisters of Twilight, they only just meet the criteria for one-man Doomstack. We also need to take into consideration as well that whichever mount she's choosing, the other mount option is available as a summon. So if she's on the Eagle, then she gets a Dragon summon. So I will take that into consideration for her because that's her personal ability. Okay, then we've got Orion. So Orion is sort of average in all areas. Like, he's not a spellcaster, but he's got some sort of like bound abilities that are kind of hybrid Lore of Metal spells. They're kind of like Lore of Metal spells, like Searing Doom and Gehenna's Golden Hound is just not called that. So he can get a few hundred kills, but those bound abilities only have a few uses and not super dangerous spells. He does have a missile attack. It's not the best. Reasonably, it's just a sort of a wonky attack because he can't fire while moving. Sometimes he doesn't. He's got a low rate of fire. He's okay in melee, and he's considered large, but he's like a medium-sized character. So, okay in melee, okay at inflicting casualties, and okay durability. He does have regeneration when he gets really low on health. So, I'd say that I think he should go in B tier, because just being average at everything is not what enters one-man Doomstack status. It's funny how the first one-man Doomstack actually isn't actually a man. And it's actually not even one. So it's a two-woman Doomstack is the first one into there. But yeah, how many times have you gone up against the Sisters of Twilight and thought to yourself, crap, she's just going to destroy my entire army. But yeah, she's quite capable of doing that. And also she's got regeneration, because when she's low on health, they use the twin ability or whatever. Fairly long wind-up, but gives her a lot of regen capabilities. So that's the Wood Elves sort of there. So they have ranked very highly so far. Well, in this tier list, so none of them entered C or D tier. Can't compare them with the others just yet, though. Okay, now we're moving on to the Warriors of Chaos. So Be'lakor is very good in melee, very high combat stats, very high damage dealing with his sword. He's very good spellcaster, Lore of Shadows. He's better spellcaster than Dryka, because he's also fast, and his Lore of Magic is cheaper. And he's also extremely durable, even though he's big. Like, Durthu and Be'lakor are roughly around the same size. But Durthu has got his Lord of Shadow ability, so he's able to get a lot of ward save with that if he's getting shot at. He's got a lot of natural missile resistance. And also, he's a flying character, and he's able to move very quickly. And that's the thing that Durthu wasn't able to do. And also, he's able to get regeneration with, of course, the Crown of Everlasting Conquest, but also with his own skill tree. If he stays near the units that are particularly scared, wavering or broken, he can regenerate that way. He also has a very high health pool. So I'm going to put him as one-man Doomstack. I'd say that they are about similar levels of threat when going up against them. Okay, then we got Village the Curseling. Village, I don't think meets the criteria for melee capabilities, but he's obviously a very good spellcaster. He can inflict hundreds or even thousands of casualties very easily. But he is also extremely durable as well, being able to constantly regenerate his barrier, so that he doesn't end up taking much damage. But yeah, his melee capabilities are not enough to enter one-man Doomstack status, so I'm going to put him at A tier there. Now, I do remember, of course, there was a submission with him as a one-man Doomstack, but that was a very high-effort Doomstack, and it also had a campaign ability active at that given time, which was allowing him to cast cast spells really cheap. So that was temporary. So we had one of the Eye of the Gods ability active. So we're not taking that kind of stuff into consideration. Any sort of campaign abilities that they have to like temporarily boost themselves in the battle, looking to use Skull Taker, that won't be taken into consideration. Okay, so then we've got Valkyr the Bloody. So basically, think of it this way. Imagine if you're judging these characters as if they were confederated by a different faction within their race. So they don't get their own personal goodies that they get from their own faction. Because otherwise the DLC lords will massively outshine everyone else just because of all the things that they can do on the campaign map to boost themselves in many cases. But anyway, then we've got Valkyr the Bloody. So she's really good in melee. She's extremely durable because she's got Gore Free. She's able to regenerate that way. So it's very hard to kill her, but she is not going to inflict mass amounts of casualties within a reasonable amount of time. So that's the area that she is not going to enter the one-man Doomstack status. In order for her to get one-man Doom status, I mean, you can get one of those Khorne items, and there's one that provides a huge amount of damage in an area effect. That's one way for her to basically become a one-man Doomstack. But like I said, we're not going to take those kind of specialist, unique items into consideration unless it's specifically her item. So victory condition items, or if you have to play as her particular faction, or something like the Doomsinger weapons, we're not taking those into consideration. All sort of cane. So I'm going to put her as A tier. Really good in melee, really good durability, just isn't going to inflict casualties at a particularly high rate. Okay, then we've got Sigvald the Magnificent. Basically very similar with Valkyr. Very good in melee, extremely high durability because small, not flying though. That's one of the best things you can be in this game is be a small flying character because it gives you so much versatility on the battlefield. But yeah, so he is small, doesn't have a mount, and he's got auric armor which will provide him with regen. Very hard to kill in melee, very hard to shoot. Usually the best way to deal with Sigvald is to not deal with Sigvald, but he is not going to inflict mass amounts of casualties. That's his biggest weakness. He's not going to just wipe out an entire army with his abilities because he's a duelist. He'll take on single entities with ease, but he can't just take on 1,000 enemy forces in a reasonable amount of time. So we're going to be putting him at A tier as well. Then we've got Festus the Leech Lord. So Festus is a Mortis engine and also a mass healer. It's got Lore of Nurgle, but his melee capabilities are not very good. So I'd say his durability and his ability to inflict mass amounts of casualties is quite high. But yeah, his melee, he's not a duelist, so he's going to enter. I'd actually go so far as to say B tier because his durability is kind of tied to his melee capabilities. He's small, but he's slow. So if anyone like flies down and catches him in melee, then his durability is actually going to be extremely low in those particular situations. So even if you sit there constantly healing yourself, it doesn't really matter if you're getting killed really quickly. So we'll put him at B tier there, but almost put him at A tier. Now, that doesn't mean that Festus isn't an amazing legendary lord. The thing is with Festus is that he really shines when boosting units around him, and we're not taking that into consideration here. That's not what this tier list is about. So on his own, he is a little bit vulnerable. Okay, then we've got Azazel. So Azazel is a really good melee fighter, also another small, flying, fast character. I'd imagine if you put Azazel and Valkyr up against each other, Valkyr would win, only by a small degree. But where Azazel has the edge is that he's a spellcaster, so he can do debuffs and also cast spells to inflict damage. He's also a Mortis engine, and he's able to regenerate every single time he casts a spell by just a little bit, but if you over the course of battle, he will fully use up his regen. Plus, you can just equip the Crown of Everlasting Conquest. Now, it is possible for him to get the Blade of Slaanesh if you play as Azazel, but again, we're not taking that into consideration in this situation here. So, I still consider him to be a one-man Doomstack, but not only just. He only just reaches that mark. Because, yeah, he reaches qualifying points in all three categories. He's durable, can inflict 1,000 casualties in a battle, and he is extremely good in melee. Then we've got Helmengorst. So, hang on. Helmengorst is a vampire. We're going to finish with the Warriors of Chaos first. Okay, so with Archaon. So Archaon, extremely good in melee. He's one of the few characters in the game that will have easily 100 melee attack and melee defense. So top marks for that one. He's not the greatest spellcaster ever, but the combination of him being amazing in melee and the spells that he has actually means that he can inflict thousands of casualties really quite easily, because if you throw him into combat against a bunch of infantry, there's not really anything they can do to him, because he's got so much ward save, he's got a really good shield, missile units aren't really going to shoot him, and even anti-large infantry, the anti-large is probably still not going to bypass his melee defense. He's got barrier, and he'll have abilities such as Searing Doom and Purple Sun of Xerius to just rain death upon them. And every single time he casts a spell, it'll also cause Kindle Flame to occur, so his flaming attacks will help negate anyone that has any sort of fire resistance. So top marks for melee, and also for being able to inflict thousands of casualties without needing like a Sword of Cain or anything. And also in terms of durability, while he does have a unique item, the Crown of Domination, in the enchanted item slot, it is better for him, as a one-man Doomstack, that is, to take that off and put the Crown of Everlasting Conquest on. So that would give him top marks for durability in that situation there. So we're giving him one-man Doomstack status. I think it'd be pretty ridiculous to not make Arcane a one-man Doomstack, considering, again, how dangerous he is on the battlefield in just about every single scenario, especially when he's on Dorgo, just because of how fast he is as well. Oftentimes you would consider that it's sometimes better to be on foot, just because being on a horse mount does make them a little bit bigger. But Dorgo is so fast and he's so durable that it's worth it to have that speed to be able to charge in and really dictate the terms of the battle. Okay, then we've got Kolek Suneater. So Kolek is very good in melee. He's quite durable because, again, he's able to get the Crown of Everlasting Conquest for regeneration. He's got quite a lot of missile resistance, and if anything was shooting at him, he's way quicker than a character like Durthu. But yeah, his size does work against him with those things. In melee, there are very few characters that will be able to go toe-to-toe with him because of his extremely high melee attack, charge bonus, all that kind of stuff. And of course, he's able to inflict a lot of casualties using his lightning bolts. But he's not a spellcaster, and he's not going to inflict thousands of casualties really quickly. So he will need basically a spellcaster or something in order to wipe out enemy forces. So I'm going to put Kolek at A tier. So once again, the Warriors of Chaos have done pretty damn well as well. They've got 3 one-man Doomstacks, 4 A tier, and 1 B tier. Okay, now we move on to the vampire accounts, starting with Vlad von Carstein. So Vlad is extremely good in melee, is a spellcaster, so naturally he's going to be able to inflict thousands of casualties fairly quickly against like massive amounts of infantry. And he is, if nothing else, he is one of the most durable characters in the game. Huge amounts of regeneration, huge amounts of resistances, very small, very high melee defense. It's super hard to kill. The best way to get rid of Vlad is to destroy his army and just try to lure him away. His biggest weakness is his relatively low speed, because he doesn't have a mount. That's basically it. But yeah, he is definitely a one-man Doomstack. He's a huge threat. Then we've got Helman Gorst over here. So Helman Gorst, with him, let's see, he is not good in melee at all. Regardless of what mount he's on, he should not be going into melee. He is very good at inflicting mass amounts of casualties because in his mount, the Brother's Corpse Cart, he is able to be a Mortis Engine, plus he's a very good spellcaster, so he's able to cast Wind of Death to get rid of infantry. But the lore of undead, the lore of vampires, is not very good at dealing with single entities or large creatures. So anything that's particularly large, Helman Gorst is not going to have anything that he's going to be able to do to deal with them. There's the spell Gaze of Nagash, which is technically anti-large, but you'd have to constantly cast that spell, and once something's in your face, you can't really cast that spell anymore. So it's not really viable. If he's on his own, for example. So he doesn't meet the marks for both durability and also for melee capabilities. He's entirely focused on like really good global bonuses, but again, we're not taking campaign bonuses into consideration here. So I think I'll actually put Helman Gorst actually at C tier, just because he really does require an army to support him. If he's out on his own, he's extraordinarily vulnerable. Not very quick, not good in melee, and not very durable. Like he's got regen, but that regen doesn't matter when he just can't fight in melee whatsoever. Okay, then we've got Isabella von Carstein. So Isabella, good in melee, good spellcaster. You know, lore of vampires, we know it's going to inflict loads of casualties. She's able to heal herself quite easily and others using the Chalice of Bathory. So she meets all 3 criteria. She's a one-man Doomstack. Probably not quite as good as Vlad. And I'm really not going to make a distinction between who's like the best in each of these categories, or else we'll just be here all day. So I just want to just briefly point out that I think that Vlad would make a better one-man Doomstack than Isabella, but it's marginal. Okay, then we've got Heinrich Kemmler. So Heinrich, we should take into consideration that he can summon Krell. So Krell will be able to sort of compensate him from his otherwise fairly low combat stats. He is a Law of Vampire spellcaster, so he's going to be inflicting massive amounts of casualties that way. He's able to get a lot of physical resistance, and he is reasonably durable. I don't think he meets the criteria for one-man Doomstack, but I do think he is an A-tier battle combatant, just because of all the ways that he is very good, just not quite as good as these two here. We're missing Manfred. So Manfred is very good in melee, very good spellcaster. You've got the Law of Death and the Law of vampires, and that's especially good now. It wasn't so good with Warhammer 1 and 2, but in Warhammer 3 it's good because of the Law of Death passive, so he's able to constantly generate loads of Winds of Magic using cheap spells with life leeching. So that's really good for him. And then also he's, like I said, really good spellcaster, and he's very durable. So he's got plenty of regeneration, and he's got a lot of mounts to choose from. So it's really important that you choose the mount that is best for the situation. So if you go on a dragon, for example, a zombie dragon, and then you're going up against a bunch of guns, probably not the best idea. Go on the Hellsteed instead, and that way they can't really hit you very well. But if you're going up against a bunch of sort of slow-moving units that don't have any missile attack, then the dragon's perfect for that. Okay, so we'll put him as a one-man Doomstack as well, because, yeah, he causes absolute mayhem on the battlefield. Okay, so the next race that we'll rate is the Vampire Coast. So starting with Silostra, let's see here. So she is pretty good in melee because she has got a lot of physical resistance, but any magical attacks are going to obviously kick her ass. She is a pretty damn good spellcaster. Law of Deeps is very good. And her durability, it largely depends on who's attacking her. If she's on her big mount, like the Rotting Leviathan, then good in melee, and I think she's able to get some healing. And the size is probably the thing that's going to work most against her there. So difficult one to rate, I think, this one. She gets like pretty high points in most of the categories, but I don't think it's high enough to really call her a one-man Doomstack. It's very much borderline, so I'm going to put her at A tier there. Okay, then we've got Aranessa. I don't think Aranessa is particularly good in melee. She is anti-large, and she does have a mount, the Rotting Promethean, which I think is one of the worst mounts in the game. I much prefer to put her on foot. She's got a ability that she can use to ensnare an opponent so they don't move and lower their melee defense, making her okay in melee, but she's not able to inflict massive amounts of casualties. She doesn't have a very high hit point pool. I don't think she's very good overall. I don't think she actually meets the criteria in pretty much any category. If I was to be generous to her, I'd put her, I'd say give her a pass in her melee capabilities. So maybe I'll put her in C tier, but I almost put her in D tier there. I'm almost expecting to do so because I really do think that Aranessa is just not a very good character. But anyway, let's move on to Noctilus. So Noctilus is a spellcaster. He's got Law of Shadows, Law of Vampires. He's got a really good mount with the Necrofex Colossus, so he's able to inflict massive amounts of casualties. That's not going to be a problem. His durability is probably the biggest thing that's going to be called into question, even though he's got regeneration passively and, of course, Invocation of Nehek if he really needs to. Being on a really big mount means that once they do come in fairly close, they can shoot him down fairly easily, similar with Durthu, except not as durable as Durthu. But I think that's the area that he's going to be the weakest. Basically, if you want him to have high killing potential, you want to put him on his Necrofex Colossus mount. But if you want him to have durability, you want to take him and put him on foot. So I don't think he can quite meet the criteria for one-man Doomstack, so I'll put him in A tier. But he is a really good overall battle combatant. Okay, then we've got Luther Harkon. So Luther can get spellcasting. I guess we need to assume that he will eventually get all of his spells. But he's not a very good spellcaster. And I guess, considering it's Law of the Deeps, if you use one well-timed Van Geist's Revenge, then that will wipe out hundreds of enemy infantry. So, yeah, I guess he can get points for that. He's pretty good in melee. He's also got a missile attack, and he's reasonably durable. His mount is the Deathshriek Terrorgeist, so that comes with regeneration, and it's very quick, and it's very good in melee. So Luther Harkon, I think, meets the criteria for one-man Doomstack. Okay, then we're moving on to Tzeentch. So Kairos Fateweaver, absolutely horrendous in melee. Does not qualify whatsoever. Like, some of the lowest melee combat stats in the entire game. The opposite of a duelist. And that's lore-friendly because he can see the past, he can see the future, but he can't see whatever's right in front of him. So he can't fight in melee for shit. But his other attributes more than compensate him for that. It's just that he's not going to enter the one-man Doomstack category because he's not able to deal with single entities very well. Even using his magic missile spell, if something was particularly fast, they could close in on him. That being said, he does have the Gaze of Fate that can pin enemy units down, so it is in many cases that he'll be able to handle it. If it's like one single entity, but if it's multiple, he won't be able to manage it. He'll easily be able to inflict 1,000 casualties in a battle, given the mass amounts of damage that the Lore of Tzeentch can do. And he's durable because of his extremely high barrier. He's got potential healing due to the Lore of Life passive. And if he's also got the Lore of Death passive, of course, he's getting essentially unlimited winds of magic. So I think good points for durability, because he's also very quick as well. Durability and overall mass amounts of casualties he can inflict. But yeah, pretty much bottom points when it comes to actually dueling. So I'm going to put him at A tier. I think that's fair, because he is a massive threat on the battlefield. But yeah, absolutely awful in melee. Probably the weakest character in the game in an actual melee fight. But that's not what his speciality is. Okay, then we've got the Changeling. So the thing is with the Changeling is that the Changeling is anyone. Now let's just assume that he transforms into a one-man, someone that we've classified as a one-man Doomstack. Let's just say he wants to transform into, I don't know, Archaon. So if he transforms into Archaon, will he be able to beat Archaon? No. He will always be weaker than the version of whoever he's transforming into, because he's not going to have their unique items, he's not going to have their unique skills, and he's just not going to have as high overall stats. It basically is going to be a lesser version of what they were. So basically the benefit of the Changeling is that you transform into whoever is going to be the biggest pain for the enemy to deal with. And so you just switch it around according to your needs. So he's definitely going to be A tier on the battlefield. But yeah, he can't get one-man Doomstack status because he's always going to be weaker than whoever we put up top there. Okay, so then we move on to, let's go with N'Kari. So that's Slaanesh, only one Legendary Lord for Slaanesh. So, one-man Doomstack. I think he does qualify because he's very good in melee and he's a spellcaster. So he's able to inflict mass amounts of casualties with the Lore of Slaanesh. He's extremely bloody fast, and so that could qualify him for one-man Doomstack status. And in a lot of the disaster battles that people have sent in where I'm using N'Kari, oftentimes I am basically destroying the entire army by himself. It is very much high effort, but that's just Slaanesh in general. So yeah, I think he does actually qualify for one-man Doomstack status, just because you can do so much shenanigans with him with hit and runs. He can pretty much duel any character in the game, with a couple of exceptions. Like, I don't think he'd be able to take on Archaon toe-to-toe, especially if Archaon's beefed up as much as possible. But usually when I'm setting him up against Tyrion, I usually do win when using him. As an example. Okay, then should we go with the Tomb Kings? Let me just get all the Tomb Kings together. Okay, starting with Khalida. So I don't feel like Khalida is very good. I'm not going to give her any points for her ability to mass kill enemy forces because she's not a spellcaster and she doesn't have very good abilities for inflicting casualties. On foot or on her Necropolis Knight mount, she's okay in melee, and I wouldn't say that she's particularly durable. Even though she's got regen, I don't think she's an amazing duelist. I kind of feel like she's D tier. Like, she's just all around kind of really meh. Like, I'm mainly just comparing her now to Aranessa and thinking, in a fight, who would win on these two here? I kind of feel like Aranessa would win against Khalida, but it's bloody close, I think, in terms of who's the most useless of them all, on the battlefield, that is. Well, actually, both of them are crap leaders as well. So yeah, I'm going to put Khalida there at D tier. And we'll see who else can also join her in D tier. I'm still questioning whether or not I should put Aranessa down in D tier as well, because these two are very similar in terms of their capabilities. Like, they've both got shit mounts, although Aranessa's is slower than Kalida's, but I do feel like her net ability gives her a bit of an edge in a duel. So that's why I'm putting her up there. Whereas, like, Kalida she just kind of doesn't have anything. Like, she got her ability to, like, a magic missile shot, but I don't think that's very good either. So yeah, I'm gonna put her at D tier. Okay, then we've got. Okay, that's Cetra. I always get these two mixed up here. That's Katep. That's Cetra. Okay, Cetra is. Let's have a look. He is pretty good in melee, but definitely not one-man Doomstack status level melee. He's got a lot of different mounts. So you've got Horse Mount, the Chariot of the Gods, and also the Cambrian War Sphinx. All of these are really good mounts. So pretty good in melee. I think enough to meet enough points in that category. In terms of his spell casting, yeah, maybe. I mean, it's Law of Nehekara, and I did mention that Law of Nehekara, you're probably not going to get hundreds of kills with that because that is a trash tier level Law of Magic. I mean, the only real damaging spell in that is that tornado, and that's possibly one of the worst vortexes in the game. That being said, Cetra can inflict thousands of casualties if he is mowing through mass amounts of infantry with his Chariot of the Gods. So you just got to require a bit of effort, but you can do it. And then in terms of his endurance, Tomb Kings tend to be a little bit squishy, but they've all got access to regeneration in their Reanimate upgraded. So when it comes to Cetra, I think he's just not high enough points in all three categories in order to enter one-man Doomstack, but I do think that he is strong enough to enter A tier. Now, when we take Katep into consideration, again, also a Law of Nehekara spellcaster, but he also gets the mount of a horse, and also the Casket of Souls, so he's an artillery piece. So I think that Katep doesn't have any problem inflicting mass amounts of casualties on infantry, but very bad against single entities. Anyone that goes into melee with him will be able to beat him, and his endurance is not particularly good. So on his own on the battlefield, he is very much similar to Helmengorst, just extremely vulnerable. So I'm going to put him right in there with Helmengorst, so at C tier. Okay, and then we've got Arkhan the Black. So Arkhan is okay in melee, not quite as good as Cetra. His Law of Magic is Law of Death, which is way better than the Law of Nehekara. So you can use Spirit Leech to get rid of single entities. And of course, with Life Leeching, you can get a little bit of Winds of Magic back. And Purple Sun of Xerios is way better than the Vortex spell that the Sekhmet's tornado of garbage. So Law of Death is just way better. I can't remember I can't memorize every single spell name. So yeah, I think he gets enough points, definitely gets enough points for his ability to inflict hundreds or even thousands of casualties. His endurance is okay. I mean, you can get a fair amount of physical resistance with him, and just like any other Tomb King Lord, you can get regeneration. And he's very quick on his chariot mount, so you can just sort of run away from anyone that is a bit of a threat. I'd say that he's, once again, sort of toe-to-toe with Cetra in terms of overall combat potential, but it's a bit asymmetrical. It's just that Cetra is better in melee, and Arkhan is better at spellcasting, and that's the key difference. But in terms of their overall value, they're about the same. So Cetra will be better against single entities and other legendary lords, but Arkhan the Black is going to inflict overall more casualties against trash, which is also important. Okay, then we're moving on to Skaven. Yep, so that's 5, 6. Okay, chuck him over there. Okay, so starting with Deathmaster Snikch. So he is... Okay, I give him high points in melee capabilities because he's able to inflict lots of damage, but he's actually extremely squishy, so he doesn't get very high points for durability, for endurance. His ability to inflict mass amounts of casualties is actually okay because of his Whirl of Weeping Blades. He's able to get a few hundred kills with that quite easily, as long as those units are not particularly high tier. But I think his melee defense and low health is kind of the thing that slows him down a fair bit. So I'd say that he is probably more along the lines of B tier, because good melee capability, good at inflicting a decent amount of casualties, definitely not 1,000. but his durability is his weak point there, just kind of squishy. Okay, then we've got Tretch Craventail. Actually, let's leave Tretch for last. Best for last, I think. Okay, let's go... yeah, we're going to go Ikit Claw. So Ikit Claw is pretty damn good in melee, actually, because you've got 2 mounts. He's actually very good on foot as well, because he's got a flamethrower in that situation. But yeah, on his mount, it's usually preferable to go with the Doomflayer, because it's a smaller target. Having him just go around spellcasting is really good. But he's actually, his melee capabilities are really quite good. He's not going to be able to take on most of these characters here in melee. But yeah, he'd probably do alright against some of these ones here in melee. So I don't think I should give him enough points to enter one-man Doomstack status for him. But I do think that he should qualify for A tier, because he'll easily get 100 kills, and he's able to regenerate. Well, sorry, I should say hundreds of kills. So he'll get loads of kills using his spellcasting, and also he'll heal because of his ability to use Second Wind Serum. But we're not taking into consideration his nuclear weapons, because that's his campaign ability. That's not his personal ability. So let's say, hypothetically, you were playing as Tretch Craventail, and then you confederated Ikit Claw, you're not going to have access to the nukes anymore. Okay, then we move on to Skrulk. So Skrulk is not very good in melee. Not the worst in melee, but just not great. He's very good spellcaster. The best of the Plague Priests. Very cheap spellcasting. So Law of Plague... Sorry, the spell Plague causes huge amounts of armor-piercing damage. Very good against the Dwarfs. You know, for something that is still going to be reduced in damage by 35%, but still... lots of armor piercing. But I think his melee capabilities and his endurance is the things that are going to let him down. So on his own, I think he's B tier, because I think he's in a similar sort of situation as Festus the Leech Lord. Very good spellcaster, but if someone in a single entity wants to go into melee with him, he's just not going to last that long. Okay, then we've got Throt the Unclean. So Throt, very good in melee, really good endurance because he's got regeneration by default, and on his Brood Horror mount, he's very quick. So if there's anyone that you don't want to fight, you just get out of there. In terms of inflicting mass amounts of casualties, that's where he's going to have a bit of a lacking. Sending a Brood Horror to go and just go into fight for a long period of time is not ideal. They're hit and run units. So he's much more of a duelist than just taking out mass amounts of infantry. He does also have some summons, so he can summon some Rat Ogres, but they are not going to inflict hundreds of casualties. So I think he does enter A tier, so he gets a qualifying mark for melee capabilities and also for endurance, but not for inflicting hundreds of casualties. Okay, then we've got Queek Headtaker. Queek is very good in a melee fight, but specifically against infantry-type single entities. He's not going to inflict thousands of casualties on the battlefield because he's got no ability to cause a ton of damage, not without equipping a Warpstone armor, which he's got the Warp Shard armor, so I guess it just depends on what you prefer. So the Warp Shard armor reduces the enemy's stats. Warpstone armor is a generic item that causes the Mortis Engine effect. Now, if you're thinking, well, then you could just put that on Throt the Unclean. The thing is with the Warp Shard armor is that the Mortis Engine, it takes a long time before it starts really inflicting a lot of casualties, and Throt should not be left in prolonged combat, so it's not going to work for him. But you could do that with Queek, hypothetically, because he does have pretty high melee defense. And so his endurance is alright just because he's small, they're not going to be able to shoot him, good amount of armor. Not the best, but he's okay. I don't think he qualifies for A tier. I think B tier is where he belongs there. Okay, and then we've got Tretch Craventail. So Tretch is very similar to Queek in that he's a melee fighter. He's anti-large, whereas Queek is anti-infantry. But I don't think his overall combat capabilities are quite as good as Queek. He's kind of low leadership. He's got basically, when it comes to Tretch, he is at his best when he sucks, which is all the time because he gets buffs when he's losing. So that's not something that I attribute highly. He's not going to get hundreds of kills on the battlefield. He does have regeneration, so fairly high points for endurance, where I think that's where most of his points are going to be. But because he's so similar in his capabilities to Queek, I think we should put him basically right next to Queek. So the Skaven are sort of mid-ish high tier with their stuff. 4 Lords in B tier, 2 Lords in A tier, of course 2 DLC Lords. Well, that being said, a DLC Lord into B tier. Okay, then let's do the ogres. All 4 of them, technically, because Tamarkan, even though he's part of Nurgle, he is also an ogre. So here we've got Scrag the Slaughterer. Scrag's not great in melee. His endurance is pretty good because he's got regen and he's fairly reasonably fast. So I reckon top points for, because he's spellcaster, he'll be able to inflict mass amounts of casualties and he's able to regenerate. So 2 out of 3 basically with Scrag. But overall not very good in melee. Most lords will be able to kick his ass in a fight. And also he's quite vulnerable to getting shot, as all ogres are. So I reckon with Scrag, B tier is probably where he belongs. Yeah, because the lore of the Great Moor is not fantastic for inflicting casualties. So I think you could expect him to get a couple of 100 kills, but 1,000 kills, you'd really be pushing it. Okay, then we've got Golg Cigarette Maneater, where he's very good in melee, and he's able to regenerate due to his item and with some of his big name stuff. But he's not going to inflict hundreds of casualties, not without something like the Nemesis Crown. So basically 2 out of 3 with him. I do think that overall he's better in the battlefield than Scrag. So I'm going to put him at A tier. Because, yeah, top tier. Like, he's really good in melee. He's able to take on quite a few legendary lords. Even some of these guys here would be a bit of a match with Golg. And his endurance is pretty damn good because he's got a lot of health. And, of course, with his item, he can constantly regenerate. Okay, then we've got Greasus Goldtooth. So Greasus is bad in melee, even though he's got good combat stats, because of his stupid fucking model, right? Because the way of he's hitting down, he has a hard time hitting things. Sometimes he just sits there staring at them, basically just shitting his pants, because he can't bloody swing his weapon because he's just sitting down all the time. He's not able to inflict hundreds of casualties, and I wouldn't say he's got good endurance because he's slower than every other ogre, so he's going to be the last person in the battle in most cases, and he's so vulnerable to getting shot. So when it comes to Greasus, he didn't meet any of the criteria, so he's D tier. He's absolutely awful on the battlefield. Greasus' skills are on the campaign map and by boosting his units, but yeah, his overall combat potential on the battlefield is extremely low, just due to him being a fat tub of lard. Okay, then we've got Tamarkan, who is an ogre, but is also, we moved on to Nurgle here. So, Tamarkan is easily a Doomstack. One-man Doomstack. Easily. I don't think I've had just about, like, maybe 30% of all save files that have been sent in recently have been against Tamarkan. He's always a huge problem. And it's always Tamarkan that is the problem, because his melee capabilities are super good. It's like he's anti-infantry and anti-large. He's got really high combat stats. You don't want to fight him in melee in most cases, because even if you send a hero to go and fight him and you win, well, then you also lose because he regenerates if he was fighting a hero, and then you end up taking damage. So you have to send in a single entity that's not a hero in order to go and fight Tamarkan, or you have to shoot him. He's quite vulnerable to getting shot by bullets. It has to be very high armor piercing, high projectile stuff. Like, so things like Empire archers are not going to cut it. He's able to inflict mass amounts of casualties because of the Pandemisium ability that's attached to him. So if you are playing as another faction, you confederate him, he'll still retain that. So be able to pop that down. Even though that is an army ability, it is attached to him. And he is able to inflict mass amounts of casualties because all of the Nurgle lords are mortis engines, and they're extremely durable in melee, so it takes a long time for them to die. So he'll easily inflict hundreds of casualties, and it'll take a very strong melee character to take him out. So one-man Doomstack for him. Okay, then we've got Epidemius. Epidemius is not a super strong contender in melee, but he's not bad. I'll give him maybe like a qualifying amount of points for melee capabilities, because he does also have some summons that he can use to help him out a little bit. Take that into consideration. He's not a spellcaster though, so I'd say he's okay in terms of endurance and melee capabilities, but his ability to actually inflict huge amounts of casualties will rely entirely on his Mortis Engine ability. So kind of like average in all things, but average enough to not enter like D tier. Be more like I'd say be more like a B tier character on the battlefield there, because you can do a fair bit with Epidemius, but not a huge amount. Okay, then we've got Kurgath Plaguefather. So His biggest weakness is his size. Obviously, he's so bloody huge, and he's slow. But he is a long-range artillery piece. He's got a huge amount of health and resistances. And so even if you were shooting at him, it'd take quite a few shots to get rid of him. He's got easy healing with the Law of Nurgle. If you do send a bunch of infantry to go fight him, again, Mortis Engine. I wouldn't qualify him as a one-man Doomstack, but I would say he's extremely dangerous on the battlefield and that he belongs in A tier. Okay, then let's do Norska. Let's start with Wulfric the Wanderer. So Wulfric is actually the only character within Norska that doesn't have access to natural regen, because all of the generic chieftains, in their skill tree, which is different to Wulfric's, they're able to put some points into the Crow or whatever, and that'll give them regen, whereas Wulfric doesn't get that. That being said, he has a huge hit point pool, especially if he's on a Mammoth. He's able to inflict mass amounts of casualties because Mammoths, even though he's not a spellcaster, he does have the Sea Fang ability, and also Mammoths, they just kill so much infantry on the charge, especially with the changes to collision attacks in Warhammer 3. So he should be able to get hundreds of kills without too much difficulty, and he is a duelist. Does he meet the criteria for one-man Doomstack? No, I think he just falls short of it, so I'm going to put him in A tier. Now, as for Throg, the Troll King, I don't dislike Throg anymore, but his real strengths are more on the campaign side of things now because of how much he boosts trolls. His own personal combat stuff, he's definitely not going to enter one-man Doomstack. He is good in melee, he's anti-large, but he is large himself. So he's vulnerable to getting shot. He does have regen. But I think he's just not going to be able to inflict mass amounts of casualties. That's his biggest weakness there. So I'm going to put him... at B tier, because I really do value being able to get mass amounts of casualties quite highly, which is where Wulfric gets the edge upon him. He's also not particularly quick, whereas Wulfric will be a lot quicker than him. And his overall abilities, like Vomit, is really not a great ability because of how finicky it is. You got to get in fairly close, and it's kind of easy to dodge it, or you might just shoot at the edges of a unit and end up only getting 5 kills. So it's a bit of a weird one, that one. Okay, so that's all of Norska sorted. So we've got Lizardmen here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, they're all accounted for. Okay, starting with Oxyotl. So Oxyotl is... I'm going to give him high points for endurance because no one can bloody see him. You can't kill what you can't see. Because he stalks and he snipes. So yeah, he'll be able to shoot while being hidden. Is he going to inflict hundreds of kills? He does have the potential to do so, because of a particular poison that it can do. So he's good at taking out single entities and taking out massive infantry, but where he's going to lack is his ability to duel. He is not going to last very long in melee, but I will put him at A tier because he is going to... It's very difficult for the AI to deal with Oxyotl. Just hide, shoot, it works out really well. But yeah, once you run out of ammo, he is a sitting duck. He just can't do anything. Okay, then we've got Gorok. Super bloody good in melee, really bloody good endurance, super high melee defense, really high amount of regen because he can increase his battle healing cap by quite a fair bit. And he has high physical resistance. He's essentially unbreakable, so he's not going to rout. And what he's not going to do is kill enemy units really quickly. So getting it is possible for him to get 1,000 kills for sure. It's just that you'll have to sit there for 45 minutes, and I'm not going to award points for that. So basically 2 out of 3 with him. Strong in melee, strong endurance, just not going to wipe out an entire army in a reasonable amount of time. So I'm going to be putting him at A tier. Very strong character though. Then we've got Nakai the Wanderer. Good in melee, not going to inflict loads of casualties on the enemy. Very similar, I suppose, in regard to Gorok, but not quite as good at endurance, just because he doesn't have that natural regen, I think, and he's bigger than Gorok. Gorok is a small character, so Nakai is much more vulnerable to getting shot. So I think Nakai belongs... Ooh, let me think about this, because the thing about Nakai is he boosts Croxigors by so much, but his own personal combat abilities... probably not really actually that good. I think he actually belongs in C tier, because if I was going to give him categories of anything, it's just strong in melee, but not strong endurance and not strong at inflicting mass casualties. So yeah, C tier for him. Okay, then we've got Kropgar. So really good in melee. You've got a very good mount with Grimlock. Not going to inflict hundreds of casualties over the course of the battle. So very similar to Gorok there. So we'll chuck him in at A tier. But yeah, really good duelist. Anti-large. Probably doesn't have quite as much endurance as Gorok, but he's still a very tanky character. Then we've got Tehenowin. So Tehenowin is a spellcaster, so he'll get top points for that. And also he gets the Engine of the God mount. So yeah, he'll be able to inflict loads of casualties with Lore of Beasts and with his special bound abilities. His melee capabilities are not good, so he's not going to reach that. He does have a lot of different options for mounts, actually, because you've got like a Horned one, you've got a Ripidactyl, and also the Engine of the Gods. And his endurance is pretty good. You can get a lot of health with the Engine of the Gods, but that also means he's quite big on that as well. So I think with Tehenowin, I'll put him at A tier and give him points for endurance, but not so much for like melee capabilities, because I think that's where he's going to be his weakest point there, but definitely not one-man Doomstack capability. Okay, and then we've got Tic-Tac-Toe. So Tic-Tac-Toe is not particularly good in melee. He is not good inflicting mass casualties, and his endurance is really just down to he's very quick. So I think that Tic-Tac-Toe, he's not a bad character. I don't want to say that. Because he's very good at boosting flying units. Very, very good at it. They're very cheap in his army. So I do think he's a good legendary lord. But on the battlefield on his own, I think he's actually D tier. He just doesn't really do very much damage. And his abilities just aren't going to kill enemy forces. Whether it be single entities or what. And his strength is definitely in the air. But at some point he's going to have to land. And yeah, I think that's going to be a big weak point for him. Okay, then we've got Mazdamundi. Mazdamundi is not good in melee if he's being as a Slan, but he is good on his mount, which I can't remember its name at the moment, the Stegodon mount. He's a very good spellcaster, and he does have fairly good endurance, but I wouldn't say that he's a one-man Doomstack because of his size. So I'd say probably A tier for him. I think we'll have to give him minimal points for melee capability. But yeah, he's definitely able to inflict hundreds of casualties, no doubt about that. And he's able to endure because he's got a lot of health and he's also got regen. Okay, then we're moving on to Kislev. So, where's the one there it is? Alright, so Boris Ursus. Very good in melee. Not going to be able to inflict hundreds of casualties, although he does have an area of effect ability, but it's limited use and it's not going to inflict a ton of damage. And his durability is not fantastic, although that being said, Kislev has got a fair few regen items, such as the Anushka's Finger Bone, so you could use that to constantly regen, but it's very slow regeneration. But that is a pretty good item for him. So with Boris, I think he belongs in A tier because he is a really bloody good duelist. He's very strong at anti-large on his bear. Okay, then we've got Katerin. So Katerin, she is actually very good in melee, just not good against single entities because her sled mount, that's very good at just mowing through infantry. They basically just can't pin her down. But yeah, it's useless against single entities. You can use her and get a fair few hundred kills with her ice magic because you can use the, what's it called? Something of winter. I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, that'll inflict hundreds of casualties easily. And she's good at slowing down the enemy forces. And she's got Death Frost. Heart of Winter, that's the name. It just popped into my head there. And Death Frost is good against single entities. It's just that it's a fairly expensive spell. So I think that she almost hits one-man Doomstack or one-woman Doomstack, but I'm going to put her at A tier. She's very good on the battlefield, but I just think on her own, you need to put in a lot of effort in order to truly make her a one-woman Doomstack. Okay, so Stanky Fingers, a Stankia. Very good spellcaster. I wouldn't say very high endurance and very high melee capabilities. So I think with her, we're going to put her at B tier, just because even though it's on one of the three, the one that she is very good. She's very quick, so her endurance score is not super low. It's just that once she does get caught in melee, she's going to die very quickly. But yeah, she can outrun most characters and most single entities, and she will cause a massive amount of casualties over the course of the battle. And of course, she can heal. She's got some funky abilities that she can do, and of course, Anushka's Fingerbone. So yeah, I think B tier for her. Then we've got Castalton. So no spell casting with him. He's got a bound fireball ability though, but I don't value that very highly. Very good in melee, very similar to Boris Ursus, although I think Boris is better. He does have regeneration when he gets low in health, so his endurance is very good. So I think that Castalton is probably going to be A tier. So very strong in melee character for sure. He's always quite a big threat on the battlefield there. Now, with Astankia being weaker than them, that just means her personal abilities on the battlefield. Overall, her faction is actually stronger, but we're not taking that into consideration. Just wanted to make that point. All right, now let's talk about Khorne. Okay, so Arbal the Undefeated. Yeah, one-man Doomstack, I think. Yeah. So Khorne's got a fair few items that they can use to heal, like the Bloody Shackle. He doesn't have natural regeneration of his own, but he is extremely good in melee, and he's got an explosion ability that he can use unlimited number of times. So he's very good against single entities, and he's very good against infantry. So yeah, one-man Doomstack for Arbal the Undefeated. That makes sense, I think, but I don't think he's like the best one-man Doomstack. Okay, then we've got Skulltaker. Now, when talking about Skulltaker, got a question: do we consider this the Cloak of Skulls? I don't think that we should. That being said, the Cloak of Skulls, while it does give him a fair bit of like melee defense and physical resistance and that kind of stuff, certainly does make him stronger, but he's still very strong in melee even without that stuff. So I'm going to give him top points in terms of his melee capabilities, because his best mount is actually the Blood Shrine, because that gives him Gore Feast, gives him regeneration. I know that you're sort of leaned towards getting him on his Juggernaut, but yeah, I do think he's actually better on his other mounts. So that gives him endurance. He's got loads of resistances, so he's difficult to kill, and he's reasonably fast. Very good in melee, but his ability to inflict mass amounts of casualties, that's kind of where he's going to lack a little bit, because he's obviously not a spellcaster. No Khorne faction, no Khorne Lord is. So I'd say that Skulltaker is I'm going to put him at A tier. Very dangerous character to go up against for sure. And then we've got what's it called? Skarbrand. So Skarbrand is very similar in terms of combat abilities to Nakari. So extremely good in melee against single entities, but also very good at melee against infantry, because what he can do that Skulltaker can't do is basically collision attack. This is where Skarbrand is the one-man Doomstack. So yeah, he's definitely getting this, because what you do with Skarbrand is just remember your ABCs. Always be charging. That's it. Same thing, really. Because while you're using your charge animation, you're using collision attack. I think that's how it works. Whatever you're charging, and you can easily rack up like 50 kills just on the charge. So you just keep on charging. He's got such huge mass, such huge speed, huge resistances. You got Gore Feast. He can easily take out entire armies entirely by himself, without getting Sword of Cain or Nemesis Crown, just with his own natural abilities. In his own skill tree, you've got boost to physical resistance, so you don't even need to get like Wurzag's defeat rate or anything like that. Extremely bloody strong. Okay, then we're moving on to the high elves. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, they're all here. So, Imrik. So Imrik, extremely good in melee, is actually going to inflict massive amounts of casualties because of his bombardment abilities and his breath attacks. And his endurance is extremely high because he's got the Armor of Kalador. So I think he does qualify as a one-man Doomstack. Then we've got Eltharion. Eltharian's not actually the best in melee. His overall melee capabilities are, it's like, okay. He's an okay spellcaster with Law of High Magic, so you can use the Fiery Convocation, I think it's called, to basically the High Elf Wind of Death, essentially, to inflict mass amounts of casualties. And you can use Endurance of his own spellcasting to heal himself. High Elves do have some really bloody good items as well, so you could, like just generic items, and crafted items using the Forge of Vol, the Invocation. So, yeah, I'm not sure if he's a one-man Doomstack, so I'm going to put him at A tier. Because, yeah, I don't see him as a one-man Doomstack. He's really good at boosting his army, no doubt about that, with his Break Upon the Walls ability. But, yeah, he is on his own just not going to inflict as much damage as Imric, and is not going to be as durable as Imric is. So yeah, I think A tier is where he belongs. So Elithanar is actually a really good legendary lord for like campaign stuff because he provides bonuses to archers faction wide, and he boosts Shadow Walkers and Shadow Warriors by so much. But his own personal combat capabilities are actually not fantastic. So he doesn't have natural regen. He doesn't have particularly high melee capabilities. He is probably not going to inflict mass amounts of casualties because he's not a spellcaster, but he is an archer. And he's got the Moonbow ability. That can do a fair bit of damage. So I think overall he's kind of got medium-high skills, but nothing that really sets him as being like a top contender. So I think on the battlefield, Elithanar is actually, on his own, a C-tier fighter. Then we've got Alariel. Obviously not amazing melee fighter, but she's on an eagle, so she's quite durable. She's got access to a lot of healing, and she's got access to banishment spell, so she can take out a bunch of infantry quite easily, as we've seen in a relatively recent disaster battle. And her lackings are going to be dealing with single entities. She's not going to be good at going into a fight with dragons or anything, and none of her spells are going to help her out that much with that. So I think that she is a very good legendary lord, but I'm going to put her at on the battlefield capabilities. I'm going to put her at B tier because I think endurance, because of her speed and healing, and she's got very high ward save as well, and also because of her ability to inflict hundreds of casualties. But yeah, she's not going to be able to duel other lords. Okay, then we've got Tyrion. Tyrion is an amazing duelist. He can inflict hundreds of casualties using Sunfang. We're not going to take the Sword of Cain into consideration, even though from a lore perspective he did pick it up. He has a lot of endurance because even though his best mount is just a horse, he doesn't have a huge hit point pool. And I guess you could go down the bloodline of Anarion and make him super strong that way. But I still think that even if you do that, the only way to make him a one-man Doomstack is to give him the Sword of Cain. And like I said, none of these will be taken in consideration for Sword of Cain. So I think he's going to get basically very high marks except for mass amounts of kills, just because even with the Sunfang, it does have a very long recharge time, and it's probably not going to inflict hundreds of kills unless the battle goes on for a really long amount of time. But overall, he's a very good duelist and has a lot of endurance because he heals using the Heart of Avalon. Okay, then we've got Teclis. Now, Teclis is actually, I think, a one-man Doomstack, but let's just discuss it here for a moment and just think about it before I actually assign him, because he's not amazing in melee, technically, but he has a lot of ward save, and he's got abilities that sort of massively compensate him for that, because he's essentially got unlimited winds of magic using his Sword of Teclis, and when he's on the Phoenix mount, that's actually pretty damn good as well. So yeah, I think I will make him a one-man Doomstack there, because all of his abilities just gives him so much versatility on the battlefield, especially when he's on the Phoenix. Now, prior to him having the Phoenix, I probably wouldn't have put him there. But yeah, I've seen him be a huge threat too many times to just not put him in that position there. And he's one of the few characters in the game that can get access to unlimited winds of magic without getting Yuan Bo's defeat trait. Okay, so now we move on to Greenskins. Okay, they're all here. Yep. Okay, so starting with Gorbad Ironclaw. So Gorbad is pretty good in melee. He is not going to inflict mass amounts of casualties, and his endurance is not very good. So he's 1 out of 3. Because, yeah, he doesn't have natural regeneration, and he's got a fairly low hit point pool, because he only gets a pig as a mount, a war boar. But yeah, he is strong in melee, but his strengths rely on him boosting his entire army and providing support for it. So that being good on the battlefield is just not really his thing if he's on his own. So I'm going to put him at C tier because, yeah, it's just 1 out of 3. Okay, then we've got Grom the Paunch. Grom the Paunch, extremely good in melee, extremely durable, and is actually able to inflict mass amounts of casualties because of the way that his chariot works. So the fact that he can keep attacking while moving is really bloody good. However, he is not good against single entities, and if you want to hit the one-man Doomstack category, you really need to have some capabilities of dealing with that. So I think A tier is where where Grom the Paunch can belong. Very good at inflicting mass amounts of casualties, but yet dueling other lords is where Grom is not going to excel. So then we've got Wurzag. Wurzag, really great spellcaster, so he's obviously going to get top marks for that. Endurance, not very high, but he is fairly quick, so we don't need to send him into melee. We just want to be constantly casting. He does have some spells like Gaze of Mork in order to... Wait, is it Gaze of Mork or Gork? I can't remember. But it's able to do some damage to single entities, and he's got a bound ability that he can use to pin them down. So I'll give him a pass on Endurance, because he can just run away from anyone he doesn't want to fight. But yeah, he doesn't have regeneration, and he's not going to last forever in melee fight. Well, it's not going to last very long at all, actually. So overall, I think Wurzag is actually going to be B tier, because I do think he has more value on the battlefield than Gorbad Ironclaw. Obviously, in a one-on-one fight, Gorbad will easily beat Wurzag, but Wurzag will easily outkill, in terms of just like mass amounts of infantry kills, Gorbad. Okay, then we've got Azag the Slaughterer. So Azag's got regen, he's a spellcaster with Law of Death, he's pretty damn good in melee as well. Is he a one-man Doomstack? No, because he's just not good enough in all of those categories, and I'd say that probably his endurances would let him down. He just wouldn't be able to really stay the course and hold on for the entire battle. Even though he's got regen, just not really good enough, because like he's on a Wyvern mount, he's easy to get shot down, and he's not that difficult to just send any melee character to go and fight him. He's not the best melee fighter ever. So I think Azag the Slaughterer belongs in A tier. Okay, then we've got Grimgor Ironhide. Obviously, really high points for melee capabilities. There are very few characters that will be able to one-on-one Grimgor. He should be basically avoided at all costs. I can only think of maybe one or two characters even up here that would even think about going after Grimgor in a one-on-one fight. Grimgor is not going to inflict hundreds of casualties over the course of a battle unless the battle goes on for a really long time. We did have a one-man Doomstack sent in with him ages ago. This was back in Warhammer 2. And yeah, it took him forever to bloody kill the entire army because it it doesn't have any abilities to dish out mass amounts of damage. Like, he's got a bit of a Bloodforge explosion, but it just doesn't do that much damage. His endurance is pretty good, even if he doesn't have regeneration. Because he's got a very high hit point pool and just extremely resistant to damage, and he's small, so it's very difficult to shoot him or to sort of pin him down and just cause mass amounts of damage. So I think Grimgor gets top marks for melee and endurance, but no marks really for mass amounts of killing. So I'm going to put him at B tier there, because I just don't think it's as high value as... I think Azag will basically provide more value on the battlefield, just because of that criteria being much higher on it. And it's like... The area that he's lacking, he's better at than the area that he's lacking, which I think is a bit higher value. Okay, then we've got Skarsnik. So Skarsnik is not very good in melee, is not able to inflict mass amounts of casualties, and is actually not particularly durable, and is not particularly quick. So he's actually, in my opinion, a D tier combatant on the battlefield. Skarsnik really shines on, once again, being like a commander. Very similar in regard to Tic-Tac-Toe. So yeah, he's just not someone that you should just throw into the fray and expect he's going to win. He's anti-large, so he can take on a few large units here and there, but most characters will be able to pin down Skarsnik and kill him pretty quickly. Okay, now let's move on to Grand Cathay. So, Yuan Bo. Yuan Bo... Okay, so all of these characters can get the Von Carstein Blade very easily by just doing the caravan. So... I will take that into consideration, because even though it's a unique item that they can get very easily. It doesn't require much effort. Not an amazing spellcaster. Probably not going to get hundreds of kills with Yuan Bo. Fairly resistant, although he's very good at single entity killing. So maybe top marks for melee, maybe not so much for killing heaps of units. Because yeah, his light magic is not fantastic, and he can't cast it while he's in dragon mode. Dragon form. But yeah, very good at taking out single entities. And he's got a lot of endurance because of the Von Carstein Blade. And of course, the Dragon Lords, they get 2 pools of regeneration because they can transform and then continue to regenerate. Although Zhao Ming, I should point out, doesn't need the Von Carstein Blade. He has regen by himself on his own. And Miao Ying is able to regenerate herself while she's in human form. So I'm going to put Yuan Bo at A tier. I'm going to put these two here at S tier, at one-man Doomstack, because they are both one-man Doomstacks. And I think that they're like really bloody good at it, both of them, because, yeah, they've got 2 pools of hit points. If you're going up against something that's anti-large, they're both good duelists. They're both going to inflict massive amounts of casualties. They've both got spells that are able to kill huge amounts of units. Yeah, they're both one-man Doomstacks. Okay, so let's move on to, the Empire now. So, we've got Elspeth von Draken. Not the best in melee. Very good spellcaster. Pretty damn good endurance. So, I don't think she's a one-woman Doomstack, but she's very close to being it. So, I'm going to put her at A tier there. Volkmar the Grim has got a lot of endurance because he's got regen on his Jade Griffin item. Not the greatest in melee, and he can actually inflict mass amounts of casualties because of his battle abilities. If he's on his mobility scooter, he gets banishment, but even if he's not on his mobility scooter, he gets the bombardment abilities. So I wouldn't say he's a one-man Doomstack, but yeah, I think A tier is where he belongs. He's very strong on the battlefield. Okay, Marcus Wolfheart, not very strong in melee, definitely not a duelist. Not very much endurance, and not really the best at inflicting mass amounts of casualties. He's probably best at like sniping single entities. That's what really he's for, and also boosting his army. So I'd say that he's more valuable than these here because he can stalk and shoot at them while moving, and you can do a fair bit of damage with him. So yeah, I'll put him at C tier, because I think he's going to get roughly around the same amount of value as Gorbad Ironclaw. Yeah, very similar to Alithanar, so that's where he belongs. Okay, then we've got Karl Franz. Karl Franz is good in melee, not the best in melee, but he is good. His endurance is okay, and he's not likely going to inflict hundreds of casualties on the battlefield, because he doesn't have any abilities to do so. So I'd say that he's B tier, Karl Franz. Then we've got Balthazar Gelt. Spellcaster, able to inflict mass amounts of casualties that way. Endurance-wise, well, he's just super quick, so he doesn't need to worry about not having good combat stats. So I think he's not a one-man Doomstack, but he is A tier, because yeah, he'll be able to inflict so much damage on the battlefield. And a lot of his Final Transmutation is quite good against single entities. So the fact that he's not good at dueling is not the end of the world for him. I think we should give him a compensation for that, but just not enough to enter one-man Doomstack, that's all. But A tier for him. Definitely the best metal wizard in the game by a large margin. Okay, then we've got dwarfs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, here. Okay, Malachi McCason. Malachi is not very good in melee. Doesn't have particularly good endurance. But you can get Iron Warden tanked. We'll keep that into consideration. So the dwarven items need to be taken into consideration. And he is probably not going to inflict mass amounts of casualties on the battlefield. The thing is with Malachi, it's his army that's dangerous, not him. Him by himself, he's not a one-man Doomstack by any means. But he does provide a lot of really good support abilities, but that's not what this tier list is about. So he's able to stalk. So I guess probably have a similar tier to these guys, because I imagine he's better in melee than these two. And he's essentially got more endurance because of the Iron Warden tanked and better items. So yeah, that's where I'm going to put him. But these two here will do more damage with their missile attack because they're able to fire while moving. And they got longer range with it. Yeah, so that's where we'll put him. Okay, Grombrindle, again, gets regeneration with Iron Warden tanked. So all of the dwarfs are going to get that. I shouldn't need to mention that again. Very good in melee. Is he going to inflict mass amounts of casualties with a Rune of Spite? He could. Is he a one-man Doomstack? You could make him a one-man Doomstack without going too crazy. So yeah, I will put him in there as a one-man Doomstack. Thorek Ironbrow has Rune of Spite by default, so you don't need to even put the Rune of Spite on him. Very good in melee. As a spellcaster, so he'll be able to inflict mass amounts of casualties. And has pretty damn good endurance. Not quite as good as Grombrindle, though. Grombrindle can last for bloody ages, and Grombrindle's unbreakable. So I'd say because he's not quite as durable, I'm going to put him at A tier. Belagar is... Again, we can just say that all of these have the Rune of Spite on them, so they're all potentially very high damage dealing. Loads of defensive capabilities. Very good in melee. Rune of Spite, yeah. And Iron Warden tanked. Yep, okay, so I'll put him at one-man Doomstack as well. Ungrim Iron Fist, I know he can make a really good one-man Doomstack. Very good in melee. Put a Rune of Spite on him. Absolutely smashes them. Very durable as well. and Thorgrim Iron Fist. Wait, Thorgrim Grudgebearer. What am I talking about? Thorgrim Iron Fist. Thorgrim Grudgebearer. He's large and he can't get on foot, so his durability is sometimes a bit called into question. He does have a lot of missile resistance. Of course, you got the Ironborn Tankard. Very good in melee. I don't think he's quite as good as these three here, so I'm going to put him at A tier, just because him not being able to switch his mount does leave him vulnerable in some cases, but he is very good at melee. The thing is to keep in mind is that with the Rune of Spite, it does dish out damage very slowly, but if you can get a big blob together, then you can easily get 1,000 kills with any of these dwarves. Dwarves are very good in combat, but yeah, you wouldn't want to do that with Malachi because of his lack of endurance. He doesn't have the defensive capabilities that these guys here do. Okay, then we're moving on to Dark Elves. Okay, so we got Rakarth here. So Rakarth is pretty good in melee. Probably not going to inflict hundreds of casualties because he's not a spellcaster and he doesn't have any abilities that's going to do that. You can use Dragon Breath, but that's not super reliable in most cases because usually getting shot while that's going on. His durability is alright. I'd say that Rakarth is just a solid B tier sort of character. Very similar, I guess, in terms to Karl Franz. Then we've got Crone Hellebron. She's able to regenerate. She's got a whole bunch of mount options. She's very good in melee. She is also, I believe, a Mortis engine. So I don't think she's quite a one-woman Doomstack, but I think she does belong in A tier. Then we've got Malice Darkblade. Very strong in melee. Able to inflict mass casualties because he can transform into Sarkhan. And he's able to get loads of regeneration with his Warp Sword of Cain. And he gets 2 loads of regeneration because you can regenerate while as Malice, and then when you transform into Sarkhan, you get your regen cap back. So yeah, he's obviously going to get... He's like the original one-man Doomstack, although he got a little bit of a nerf recently. Okay, then there's Lockyer Felhar. Lockyer does have access to regeneration. That being said, the Dark Elves do have a generic item they can have for regeneration. So actually, you know what? I will put Rakarth at A tier. Just bump it up just because if we equip him with that, that will make him better. Then, okay, Lockyer Felhar gets regeneration to his unique items. Very good in melee. Is he going to inflict mass amounts of casualties? No, he's too similar to Rakarth, basically. So let's chuck him in there. He's basically the anti-infantry version of Rakarth, whereas he's anti-large. Okay, Malekith. Malekith spellcaster, loads of mount options, very good in melee, very durable. Again, can have regeneration if you switch one of his items for the regen item. Does he get access to Soul Stealer? I can't remember. Yeah, I think he does, because he's entirely dark magic, isn't he? Okay, yeah, so I think that he could potentially be one-man Doomstack, but it's like borderline. It's like really borderline, so maybe... Yeah, I think I will put him at one-man Doomstack, because very good spellcaster, very good in melee, and he's got access to healing, and he's quite durable. Just definitely not the best one-man Doomstack by any means. Okay, then we've got Morathi. Morathi is actually quite good in melee, because she's able to debuff everyone around her, and she's actually got very high anti-large, so she's very good against large creatures. And since she flies, most large creatures that are coming at you are flying. They will be large. There are a couple though that are small, and she won't be very good against them. But she's very good spellcaster. She's able to inflict a lot of damage with all of her spells are really good, and she's able to generate extra winds of magic using her power of darkness. She's really good at that because it only costs 1 winds of magic. Like Malekith has got it as well, it just doesn't cost him winds of magic, costs him a little bit more. Her durability is really quite good. I think she's a one-woman Doomstack as well. Because yeah, she's able to inflict mass casualties, she's good in melee, she's got a small mount. I think she's a one-woman Doomstack. Okay, and then we've got Dickhead Daniel the Damned Demon Prince. Okay, so... this guy sucks, but he can be good. But he most of the time sucks. He can't equip regular items. He has to equip his demonic item stuff. He's big, right? But he's slow. He's not a good spellcaster, and if you make him a good spellcaster, it'll make him weak in other areas. Basically, anytime you make him strong in one way, it makes him weak in another way. And the thing is, he's got so many ways he could potentially become, but in no way can you make him a one-man Doomstack, because he can't... Like, he's the only character here that actually can't equip the Sword of Cain. I think he still can't equip the Nemesis Crown. He can't equip, like, the Helm of Draiska. So, yeah, I'm actually inclined... Oh, I don't think he should be D tier. I think he should be C tier, because like Daniel the Demon Prince, he really fucking sucks on the battlefield most of the time. He's so easy to kill. He's not like Be'lakor, where Be'lakor's just got shitloads of resistances as well. And yeah, the AI, as soon as they see him, they will definitely target him. He doesn't have very good winds of magic. Yeah, definitely not a good character on the battlefield. I can't believe 3 years on they still haven't fucking changed any of that shit with him. He's still just as trash as he was on the day that they threw him into the game. But whatever, is what it is. Interesting concept, poor execution. Okay, so now let's do Chaos Dwarfs. Okay, so starting with Astrogoth. Let's see, where should we put him? So, very durable in melee. Good spellcaster. Got potential for healing because they got access to certain items. Is he a one-man Doomstack? Ooh, borderline. I'd say yeah, but borderline. You'd really have to kit him up quite well with just the items that the Chaos Dwarfs can get. But they like the Dwarves, they can get some very bloody good items. Then, wait, hang on. That's Zatan the Black. Oh my god, I don't even know my Chaos Dwarfs. That's Zatan the Black. So Astrogoth, you go over there. Oh my god. Zatan the Black... he's got regen, he's good in melee, but he's not good at mass killing, because he doesn't have any, like, mass amounts of damage or anything like that. So I'd say probably A tier for him, because, yeah, he's very dangerous on the battlefield, and he can, of course, strip enemy units of their magical attacks because of his Lamassu mount. Okay, and then there's Drazoath the Ashen. Drazoath the Ashen is definitely a one-man Doomstack, because his mount... gives him versatility on the battlefield. He's good in melee. He's got so much good capabilities for equipment, and his spellcasting, you can just wipe out entire armies with Drazoath the Ashen. And I have used him as a one-man Doomstack before. It's so viable, and you can do it super early on as well. Very, very good one-man Doomstack. Okay, let's do Bretonia next. All right, so the Fey Enchantress. Not the greatest in melee, but not terrible. She is a Mortis engine. She's very good spellcaster, Law of Life, and her endurance is mid-ish. I'd say that she's... I think I can give her A tier with that, but I don't think she qualifies for one-woman Doomstack. Now, Rapance, she's decent amount of durability. Very good combat capabilities. She's actually able to dish out a decent amount of damage to mass infantry because of her explosion, but overall her marks on that are sort of mid to high. I don't think she qualifies as a one-woman Doomstack. We've done a one-woman Doomstack with her before, but she was kitted out like crazy, like Sword of Cain, Nemesis Crown, all that kind of crap, and we're not taking that into consideration. So I think that she definitely belongs in A tier. Alberic. Alberic's good in melee, and his Trident of Manan is... or Mathlan, is... Or is it Manan? Mathlan is the elven version of it, I think. It doesn't matter. Yeah, he can do a lot of casualties, infinite lot of casualties, but he's only got 2 casts of that, I think. Quite good in melee, not the best, not the worst. I think he's A tier with this. Because, yeah, I'd say he's better than Karl Franz, which is weird, because he's so generic. I don't think he's even got a like designated voice actor. It's just generic Bretonian. It's just hard to justify putting him above Karl Franz just from a lore perspective, but at the same time, his capabilities on the battlefield do oftentimes exceed Karl Franz. Yeah, I'm going to put him... Look, I'll put him right next to Karl Franz, but just say that he's maybe a little bit higher than Karl Franz. Then we've got Lewin Liancourt. He's got natural regeneration, very good combat capabilities, but he's not going to inflict casualties really quickly because he doesn't have any spellcasting. So I think A tier for him. I do think that Lewin Liancourt is a better fighter than Karl Franz. Okay, then we've got the Beastmen. So we've got Taurox the Brass Bull. So Taurox, very good in melee, a lot of durability because he's got Gore Feast. In terms of his ability for dishing out mass amounts of damage, it's very similar to how Scarbrand works in that you just always, you remember your ABCs, always be charging. So yeah, I am going to put him as a one bull Doomstack, because he is very good at it. Plus, the Beastmen have a lot of items that can make him into a Mortis engine as well, like banners that you put on him. So yeah, you can make him ridiculously strong. And he can inflict easily hundreds of kills quite quickly. Okay, then we've got Morgur. Morgur is not fantastic in melee. He's okay. He's able to inflict hundreds of casualties just because he stinks to high heaven. Because even though he's not a spellcaster, he's like the most stinky Mortis engine in the game by a fair margin. And he's got lots of regen, and he's got lots of resistances. So does he qualify for one bull Doomstack or one goat Doomstack? Not without a huge amount of effort. Now, it is definitely quite good to get the Sword of Cain playing as the Beastman, but I'm not taking that into consideration. So I think A tier is where he belongs. Then we've got Kazrak, the One Eye. So Kazrak's good in melee. You've got some good mount options there. With his chariot, you could inflict mass amounts of casualties, and here's the thing, you probably could have made him a one-man Doomstack prior to Warhammer 3, but since they nerfed one of the items that you can get from the regen, maybe not. But then again, they can get Troll Hide, so you could get him regen, but still, I don't think he quite qualifies for one-man Doomstack. He's just not quite high enough there. But overall, reasonably good combat stats. And then Malagor. Malagor used to be definitely like a one-man Doomstack, because he just killed everything, just because of how overtuned the Beastmen were, but he's been quite significantly nerfed since then. Very good spellcaster, very good endurance in terms of just being very small. The big weakness for him is that he's just not going to be able to take out single entities. He's not going to be a duelist, so we're going to have to put him in A tier there. Okay, so there we have the tier list there with all the characters. Now, you might have noticed that I just scrolled up just an ever so slightly, and there's a tiny bit of blue up over here. Well, what does that mean? Let's go up a little bit further, and we're going to have another category. What's that? Better than one-man Doomstack, because one question that I always get is, who is the best? And I had to have a big think about this, and I decided this before I did any of the tier list. Who is the best soldier on the battlefield in the game? And it's going to be one of the characters here that are in the one-man Doomstack. So, is it the Sister Twilight? Is it Be'lakor? Is it Vlad von Carstein? Is it Tamrakhan? Well, the character that I've decided is the best one-man Doomstack, just based on their own personal skills without having to go get the Sword of Cain. Basically is able to duel pretty much anyone in the game. I can't imagine in many situations any of these characters would be able to actually one-on-one defeat this character just using their own skill tree. And that character is Archaon. So Archaon I'm considering to be the best melee, just the best warrior in the entire game. He's a spellcaster, he's able to inflict mass amounts of casualties, he's got huge amounts of endurance, and in my opinion he's got the highest combat stats and the most overall versatility on the battlefield. It's going to be hard-pressed for any individual character here to be able to actually defeat Archaon in a one-on-one fight. It's just extremely difficult. Basically, you need a team of people in order to take out Archaon. Unless, of course, you're way higher level than him. You just managed to catch him at a low level. But yeah, if you equip him with the Crown of Everlasting Conquest, you're using Spirit Leech, you're using Searing Doom to take out infantry. You got lots of Winds of Magic. His combat stats are routinely over 100. You're easily able to run away from most enemies that are trying to gang up on you. But yeah, in a one-on-one fight, I can't imagine just about anyone here really giving that much of a challenge. The only one that might be able to give him a run for his money is maybe Tamrakhan, just because Archaon would beat Tamrakhan, and then Tamrakhan would revive. So in order for Archaon to defeat Tamrakhan, you'd have to get him close to death, and then you'd have to Spirit Leech him so that you get away from that aura. But yeah, he is faster than Tamrakhan, so you definitely could just run away from him and just keep Spirit Leeching him, and Tamrakhan couldn't do anything. And basically, Archaon could just Spirit Leech basically anyone here. He does have enough Winds of Magic to do that. So yeah, Archaon is the character that I consider to be the best in the game in terms of on the battlefield. Anyway, let me know in the comments below what you think of this particular tier list, whether you agree or disagree with it. Obviously, it's extremely top heavy. The vast majority of the characters ended up in A tier or above, and less than 50% of them are B tier or below, and only 4 characters end up in D tier. And in the case of Greasus Goldtooth, that's just because the game engine just can't freaking handle his stupid model. Otherwise, he probably would have ended up in C tier. Anyway, that's the end of this one here, guys. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Don't forget to check out Manscaped, link in the description. Appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Later, guys.